Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Lakeshore Ethnic Diversity Alliance Community Conversations. My name is Gloria Lara, and I am honored to serve as Executive Director of LEDA, LEDA, as we call ourselves. We've been having these conversations since June, since right after the unrest that followed George Floyd's death, and we've continued them with just a very minor break during our annual summit, and we will keep continuing these. However, I've decided not to have one on the week of Election Day. I thought that it would be prudent to just let all the rhetoric die down, and then we can get started again the week after Election Day. So we will be taking a short break in November. So today, I am really, really pleased to introduce Milinda Ysasi. I'm bringing Milinda on.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Milinda.
Hi, how are you doing, Gloria?
Good. So Milinda Ysasi is Executive Director of a nonprofit called The Source. They work with 21 different businesses to provide wraparound support. And in November of 2019, she was elected the first Latino to serve on the Grand Rapids City Council Commission. She's a proud graduate. Hang on, I have to clear my throat. She's a proud graduate of Grand Valley State University and of Michigan State University. And then 6 years ago, she started the Latina Network of West Michigan with 3 friends. And right now, as you may be aware of, this is National Hispanic Heritage Month. So I've been focusing on different Latino, Latinx people to come in and talk about what they do and how they got involved in what they're doing. I thought it would be appropriate, especially this election year, to bring someone younger who has done an election and was elected. And so we'll be talking about that in a couple of minutes. But first, Milinda, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself? I understand you are a Grand Rapids native.
Yes. So thanks again for having me, Gloria, and thanks for doing these sessions. You know, I think we're finding all new sorts of ways to connect with people during this time. But I am from Grand Rapids. I was born here. I grew up here. My mom and dad both were born here in Grand Rapids, and my grandparents and great-grandparents came here as farm workers initially, a little bit north of Grand Rapids, and then settled into this community, working in manufacturing, working in education. And so my roots here are very deep, and I love this community. And I'm married. I have my husband is Raphael, and we've been married for almost, 12 years now. We met at Grand Valley, and I like to joke that I'm not really responsible for things outside of myself. So I don't have a lot of plants. I love plants, and my coworkers help me take care of them. I don't have any children. I have a 16-month-old niece, Luna, and she is I can't imagine loving another human being as much as I love her. So I'm very, very connected in Grand Rapids, and I'm excited to be here talking with you. For those who might be viewing on the Lakeshore, I have a little bit of history working on the Lakeshore at Herman Miller. So happy to join you today. Oh, I think you're muted, Gloria.
Yes, because I was clearing my throat. Thank you. So you work for some of our leading companies. You already mentioned Herman Miller out on the Lakeshore, also Spectrum Health and Cascade Engineering. Mm-hmm. And I've actually known you for almost 10 years, and I've always been fascinated by the common thread that you found among your different positions. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah. So absolutely. I feel so just really grateful that I've worked for some amazing leading companies in this community. Growing up in high school, I knew I wanted to go into business. I was a proud recipient of the Minority Business Education Center scholarship at Grand Valley. That was prior to Prop 2 taking effect, which really ultimately banned things like affirmative action programs and specific scholarship programs. But I always knew I wanted to be in business. And so Cascade, I ended up there through a program called Inroads, which still exists, but it was focused on placing, at that time we used language like minority. Now I would use language like Black or people of color or Latinx for those of us who wanted to be in that business community. And so I ended up there knew nothing about manufacturing, knew nothing about Cascade. I was interested in engineering and quality management all those years back then. And I ended up growing up there. I started there when I was 19. I left Cascade when I was 31. I truly did grow up there. During that time, I had married my husband. I learned so many things. I went through, the economic downturn of what it's like to shut down facilities and then, maybe 10 months later, build them back up. And so leaving Cascade to go to Herman Miller was just a big challenge. And I thought about it so much. But my friend Maxine Gray, who many people know, certainly on the Lakeshore, who's no longer in this community, but is still, still is a friend, encouraged me to apply for Herman Miller. And, then when I was there, I was able to grow in my career. I got a sense of, I got to be in a global company. I got to be in a publicly held company, which was different than Cascade. And then, when I was looking to come back to some sort of more be in Grand Rapids, Spectrum was there. I had no background in healthcare, but there was a strong thread of, lean manufacturing, continuous improvement that helped me, I believe, to get that next opportunity. But the common thread among all of those organizations is that, for me, it was individual organizations that said, yes, we're going to provide whatever our product is. We're going to provide whatever our service is. We're going to provide excellent healthcare in this community. And also, what are we going to do to enrich and enhance what our community looks like? Very explicitly, I think at Cascade with the Welfare to Career program, the Returning Citizens program, taking a really strong stance almost 10 years ago, being an anti-racist organization. At Herman Miller, it was investments in things like the Herman Miller Academy that focused on young people getting into careers, recognizing the barriers that could exist for people in terms of not just time, but also money. At that time at Herman Miller was also working on exciting projects with teams around the flexible retirement program that recognized that how people leave the workforce is as important as it is of how they come into an organization. And then at Spectrum, for me, it was working on a variety of projects, talking about how we can, not just provide for that physical health of individuals. It's not just about walking into a hospital setting. It's not just about walking into your doctor's office, but that your health, how you are cared for in this community is so dependent on things like where you live, the kind of housing that you have, the kind of job or educational attainment you're able to get, and all of those other social determinants of health. So for me, it was that explicit communication to me as a job seeker of, we want to be different and this is how we're going to differentiate our work experience. And I truly do believe that all of us, as we're looking for opportunities, we are consumers of our work environments, and businesses who better understand that, who create an environment where they are really trying to not just recruit you, but to, sell you on their brand, are much more successful than any other ones that, that I've seen. And so that's a common thread. And now all three of them are my clients at the source. So Cascade, we've worked with them prior to me being here, but we were able to bring on Herman Miller and Spectrum since I've joined in the last 5 years. So it's like I never got to leave.
Great. So tell us about a little bit about the source and the equity that you're really so passionate about.
Sure. So the source was an idea started by CEOs, really led by Mark Peters from Butterball Farms, who's actually now written a book about the source. It's actually called The Source and should be coming out shortly. I just wrote a little forward, not a forward, but a recommendation in it. And so I'm excited about that book to come out. But it was this idea that CEOs had that, we invest in our employees in so many ways. We see them leaving the work environment for things that, potentially are voluntary that we would have maybe some more control over. So how can we better support our employees when they are looking for things like housing, for transportation, when they want to go back to school, when they have a goal of purchasing a home? And this idea was, how can we create this really independent organization, because those business leaders, those CEOs also recognize that while they care for their employees and their companies, sometimes they are not the best person suited to help their employee resolve, a housing issue. And they also wanted to ensure that there was really dignity in work, in the sense of if you go and tell your employer everything about what's happening in your personal life, that can create a relationship that is not really healthy, that does not have a lot of dignity, and potentially could, violate some of those boundaries that we want to have in the workplace. So, I often, I didn't get to say before is that when I worked in all those companies, my role was always in HR. And so coming to the source, my role is, definitely working in an HR environment. But most of my job is, leading a team, is the sales and marketing of the source. So doing things like this and talking to people about what we do, sharing that story, and really ensuring the quality of our services. So today, as we've evolved over time, the way that we position ourselves is that we are an additional benefit in the marketplace to businesses. For businesses who want to differentiate their work environment and who recognize that many of their employees, particularly those on the front lines, those who are probably earning under $25 an hour, have different challenges because of just inequities in our system. So sometimes that's looking at housing, sometimes that's in education, sometimes it's in a healthcare environment. And so for me, when I worked at Cascade, I had no understanding, and that was 1998, 99. Did not understand what this idea of equity meant. I think at that time, and the way that I grew up in the business world, was talking about diversity and wanting to ensure a diverse workforce. And today, to me, in my lifetime, the conversation has moved towards, yes, representation is important. I'm very proud to be the first Latina elected to City Commission. And also, we have to continue to work. My being there alone is not solving for the barriers that exist in a multitude of our systems. So much of government wasn't designed for people of color, for Black people, for Latinx individuals. And so today I'm really, doing this work at the source, my full-time job, or sort of full-time job, and then leading at the city as a city commissioner, is able to say, when we do this work, I can focus on the policy pieces and create more equitable outcomes for our community. Oh, I didn't get to hear that either. I'm sorry.
I keep muting myself because I keep clearing my throat and I don't want people to hear me. So before I forget, how can a company get involved with the source? I mean, to me, because my background's business, and I think what you offer is unique in the source, because having that relationship, you don't want to tell your employer everything that you're having problems trying to find a place to rent, or you're trying to get childcare or things like that. But there's this other resource. Is that unusual, or are there other cities that have resources like this source?
Yeah. So it is, I think initially it was a little unusual. There weren't many organizations that were doing this. I think that, certainly in being in the nonprofit world, we have strong philanthropy, obviously, in our community, as many of us know and experience. But also this idea that those business leaders had, that they were going to actually pay into it. So that's the one thing I didn't mention, is that most of our support as a nonprofit comes from a membership fee that businesses pay. And then about 20% is supported by philanthropy. But really the goal that businesses believe is that, we see a value in this. You're part of our supply chain like any other, partner we have. We want to have a value added relationship to support, our talent function of the organization. I think for many, it makes a good return on investment when we know what the costs of turnover are. And then you can work with a nonprofit locally. You can know that your employees are being supported, and your business leaders can focus on the things that they need to. So, I think in the past, when I've talked to other leaders, a lot of times HR leaders or supervisors, are talked to about, this is the challenge I have. I might sleep in my car tonight. I don't know where I'm going to live tomorrow. Who's going to watch my kids? And while those leaders should care and be very empathetic, and they don't have that repeatable experience and training to identify the solutions for their employees. So it's like, if I were doing the resource navigation function at this organization, that would not be putting my skills in the best place. You wouldn't be paying for the right things. And businesses, I think, have also said that makes sense in the social service sector. So we are a membership model. So it's 21 employers. They work very closely to say, we don't just want people to join us, because I have a lot of people say, well, you should have like 100 members. There are obviously, as with any nonprofit, some capacity issues about what we're willing to take on. We never want to erode the quality of our service. And also, those businesses want to make sure that the people who join on share their values of how they started this organization. So, a lot of family-owned business, a lot of businesses that are located here in West Michigan, still privately held, or who have a very strong commitment to not just what they're doing every day in their business, but that they understand that their talent is that differentiator and support. So if anybody wants to know more about us, they can just reach out to me. I have, being an elected official, I have my contact information everywhere. So I have a strong presence on LinkedIn, or, they could just reach out to the source. And thank you for putting the website up there. And we'd be happy to talk about what we do. And we take a very, very much like a consultative approach to our selling. I won't call you a bunch of times. I won't badger you. We'll see if it's a right fit. And if it's not, we have other partners that we can work with and identify if you're looking more for, training and development or some of that stuff on the front end. We work really closely with partners like West Michigan Center for Arts and Technology, with West Michigan Works, which is over a multitude county region here on the west side of the state. And have other partners. Just our belief is that we don't need to compete with our partners in this space. We need to work together to create better outcomes for those who are working at our local companies.
Great. Well, that really keeps you busy. But now let's sort of flip over to why why I thought it's like, oh, I really need to talk to Milinda and have her come on board, because what you've done and what you've accomplished, and I hopeful that it's just the beginning, is pretty amazing. So you started volunteering in the community and then served on a number of Grand Rapids city boards. Can you tell us about your journey?
Sure, absolutely. So I really don't know. My parents joke, how did you get interested in this idea of politics? I like to think of it as public service. And my parents were public educators. My dad was a principal. My mom worked in the school system as a secretary. And they always showed us the importance of, supporting our school, supporting people. They had, 35 plus years in the school system. And my grandmother also worked in the school system, as well as my aunt. So I don't think I realized that until I got older, that they showed me that path to public service. It was just, in a different way. So when I was an undergrad at Grand Valley, I was very focused on, I was the president of the Latino Student Union. I worked with my now husband and my sister, good friends, Stacy Stout, who's the highest ranking Latina in our city government, first ever. And, back when we were just youngsters at Grand Valley, we were leading that student group and focused on things. I'm reading Maria Hinojosa's new book, Once I Was You, and I remember going to pick her up at the Gerald R. Ford airport and to take her to this hotel, and she came and spoke to us. And I think, 20 years ago, I was doing all these things that were leading me to this moment to run for office. And then when I got done with school, again, working at Cascade, there was a strong support, a strong understanding that if you were going to work at Cascade, it had to be more about the job. So it was actually Cascade that encouraged me to get involved. So doing things like our civilian appeals board for policing. I was on things like a traffic stop study. I was part of an HR task force to focus on better policies for city workers and city government. I served on our civil service board. There's so many acronyms in government. Our civil service board, which is essentially like an HR oversight board. And at one point I thought I might have wanted a career in government, and even interviewed for a career in government. It didn't work out that way, but I was constantly encouraged by mentors. So I think we talk a lot about mentors. I also teach in a program for Ferris State, the LEDA program, and I focus on the professional development side. And so we absolutely need mentors. We need people who are there, to talk with us. But having those sponsors along the way, the people that actually are going to talk about you in a very good way, that are going to continue to elevate your profile, that is what has placed me in this spot, and that's what I want to do for others. So it was about 12 years of volunteering. I ran for office a number of other times, did not win. And then on my fourth try for essentially the probably the largest commitment in terms of, kind of the purview of city government and what you do as a city official is the time that I win. And so, my constant reminder to myself and to others is to have that persistence, is to not give up. I mean, in my head, I always said, I'm going to run for office and I want to win. And at one point, I kind of gave up that dream, and it got reignited by people who were those sponsors who were around me to remind me, and my lovely husband, who basically did everything that I needed him to do on my campaign, and is my constant motivator.
Wow, that's a really great journey. Can you dive a little bit more into the details? Because people, they hear, yeah, I decided to run for office, but what does that really mean, and what's scary about that? But what's exciting about that?
I always say, if you're not feeling a little anxious or scared, or you don't feel a little sick to your stomach, you're probably not doing, the work that is the most valuable. I think when you first decide to run for office, a lot of times in local politics and running for office, there are certainly challenges and barriers of, you need to wait in line. Is it your turn? And to be honest, as a young Latina, I certainly face that, where I've had people tell me, I think you'd be good in this, but I'm not going to support you because, it's not your time, or things like that. So it's been pretty frustrating at different points, challenging, overwhelming. I've, had people who, during the campaign told me, they would support me, then they really weren't. And, you really learn during a campaign who are much like a net promoter score. Those who are watching, who utilize the system, is like, who are your detractors, who are neutral, and who are your big promoters. And you really find out who those promoters are. But the biggest thing when you run for office that I've learned, it's much like project management. So you need to say, what is the start of this project? What is the end date? And what are all the things that you need to do? And every day you have to do something, every week you have to do something, and every month, these different milestones have to be accomplished. One of the biggest things that I would suggest is, if you are interested in running for office, is to go to that body, or to watch that body, especially right now, being held. See what that protocol looks like. How are their meetings held? What are the things that they're talking about? After you decide to do that, I would suggest talking to people who are actually doing the job, to see if this is something that you'd like to do. I am still very happy that I decided to do it. I'm happy that I'm doing it. But doing that research ahead of time, being very connected to the predecessor to my position, Commissioner Ruth Kelly, was very important. I knew what to expect. She was my ultimate sponsor. And then ultimately, it is raising money. Running for office is expensive. I raised over $50,000 and pretty much used all of that money. And it's a little frustrating, because you raise a bunch of money to print off and to develop mailers that you have to pay to mail to people's homes, that probably get recycled a lot of the times. But I had an amazing design team that helped me to design materials that were not, were not negative. They were very positive. I'm very proud of the positive campaign that we ran. I always say, if people have to run on, sort of what's bad about their opponent, it's never good. You should run on why you're going to be the best choice. And you have to constantly ask yourself that question. Why am I running? Why do I want to run? And what differentiates me from individuals? But it's essentially like project management. You have a budget, you have a team, you have to figure out how to motivate people to come out for you. And my final weekend before the election last year, we had something like 80 volunteers who came out to help us canvass the second ward, to get that word out about our election. So I'm very passionate about helping other people run for office too. Right now I'm working on a couple of campaigns. I try to focus on very local campaigns that often don't get the attention that they need. So right now it's the GRCC Board of Trustees, and also just doing, general voter outreach. I love going door to door when it's safe to do so. And, there's a whole science of how do you motivate people, to get to the door for you. But we ran on a campaign of the Ysasi Posse. We try to make it very fun. Again, just had great supporters. I was proud to be supported by a number of people who had already served. One of my biggest mentors has been Commissioner Sunita Lanier in the 3rd Ward. And so she was able also to help me understand what it was like to be a woman of color. She's a Black woman, to serve on a body that oftentimes that hasn't seen you, serve. So she ran in 2013 as the first Black woman elected to the city commission. And then a few years later, I'm the first Latina. But we're in the late 2000s having this conversation. So if anybody out there is watching, reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you if you have any desire to run. If you don't know where to start, that's kind of like my pastime.
Well, that's really great. What was the I have two questions here. What was the hardest part of running for office?
The hardest part was probably it's just the time. It's the time that anything takes. I gave up so much to run for office in terms of time. I had to say no to many things that were very dear to me. I had to say no to time with family and friends. And many were understanding, but sometimes others were like, why can't you just come and hang out? There were times I would see my grandma probably before all of this, definitely more than once a week or once a week. And you just had to remind her, Grandma, I'm running for office. So I'm doing this for us, so you might not see me as much. But right when I had announced, I was in the final 2 months of my executive MBA program at MSU. And for whatever reason, MSU, love the program. But those last 2 months were the most filled of projects and deadlines and writing. And it was funny because in the fall, I did not have a lot of stuff to do in the fall preceding my announcement in January of 2019. And so I was running an organization, going to business school, and running a campaign and trying to be a really great partner to my husband. And I just felt just beat down and I was so tired. So it's the stamina. It's that you have to get up every day and you have to really believe in yourself that I'm asking all these people to give up their time and their money. And when you doubt yourself, it's really hard to do that. So it's that you're giving up something for sure. I don't believe that you can have it all. There's a lot of myths specifically for women about you can sort of have it all and be this, amazing person. And I always think, what it was me eating cheese and crackers at my, kitchen bar counter, at 9 o'clock at night. My husband and I just agreeing that we were not, I think we had one argument during the campaign, like right at the beginning. We said, we can't be frustrated with each other because it's going to be frustrating. But then beyond that, I think there is a reality of you're putting yourself out there. You are cultivating a brand and an image. And some people find that off-putting. Some people find that you shouldn't be doing that's you're overexposing yourself. So there's you're very vulnerable. During my campaign, I had a lot of negative things said to me, at the door. I had people ask me, make fun of my name, question why I didn't have children, question if I had a job. I had somebody who said, like, well, what do you actually do? How do you make money? I've had people who question my Latina identity, other Latinos, which quite honestly, that was probably the one time where I honestly cried on my campaign. I think I cried twice. That's what I often tell myself. And also, I think the other hard thing is that when your mom or your dad know that somebody is being mean to you, my Latino parents were like, who do I need to go and talk to? And I'm like, okay, mom and dad, you have to calm down. Actually, my mom more than my dad. But, your parents just love you fiercely and they don't want you to hurt. They don't want you to feel pain. And, I think that's the hard thing too, is that it's not just you experience that exposure, it's your family experiencing that exposure as well. And they might not have necessarily wanted it or asked for it. Mm-hmm. And I think that, historically and anecdotally, we know that, oftentimes women, we do not think that we are, knowledgeable or skilled enough to run. But my good friend on the Lakeshore, Shannon Garrett, always reminded me over the years, it's like, do you run the finances for your household? Do you, what are all the things that you do as an individual? You have the skills to do that. And don't let this system that is, really wasn't designed for women prevent you from moving forward with what your dream is.
Great. Those are all things that people don't really think about or say, oh, I'd love to run for office, but then there's so much behind it.
Yeah.
You putting it in the terms of being a project manager. I've done a lot of project management over the years. I go, yeah, she's right. That's exactly what it is. Mm-hmm. But so let's talk about the flip side. What was an unexpected joy of running for office?
Honestly, I look back, I have a presence on social media. I'm a definitely an extrovert. I love my energy comes from being with people. And so, the best thing was getting people to just show up no matter what they had going on. I had so many friends that helped and supported me, people like Kim Bodie from helping to provide space to, people like Mercedes Barragan who helped organize volunteers, my dear friends, Ruth and Mary Alice and Sunita, who were there from the beginning. But it was honestly the people that you met. I remember going to brunch one day with my friend Becca and Sanja from Baxter, and we sat down. We were at Tara. I always was like, we have to be in a second ward restaurant if I'm going to take a break. And on my bill, the server had put, "I'm rooting for you. I wish you so much luck. I'll be voting for you again in November." And that feeling of somebody who you have no idea who they are, they happen to be serving you. I was in, I don't know, I was just in regular clothes. I didn't have my campaign shirt on. And to get somebody just unsolicited who said that they support you, they resonate with what you're saying, is one of the best feelings in the world. So that was unexpected. And then honestly, for me and my husband, the campaign, I think, represented a way that was it was our 10-year present to ourselves. We kind of joke, we had been married for 10 years in 2019, and I think our relationship has just grown even stronger. We've been, together and then married for some time, but when somebody that you love, he's always been very supportive. Always, anything that I wanted to do, okay, you're doing that. But in this instance of the campaign, it wasn't just that support verbally and in the home and doing all the things that we needed to do to keep our household running, but he was actually just like, oh, he's a project manager by nature. And so he was able to help me so much. So it was really like, our relationship became stronger. And I didn't necessarily expect that. I thought that there would truly be strains because running for office in so many ways is a very selfish act. And with our Latino identity and culture, I that's almost like very anti to what we're taught. We share, we have family, my cousins are like my brothers and sisters. And so to engage in what some may consider as a selfish act in some ways, it actually resulted in a lot more love and support. So, that was very unexpected, but it's a joy. And, sometimes I wish we had we've had some friends who've done some video of us, and we are reflecting on how we'll see that in the future. But, I'm glad it's over though. I'm glad I don't have to campaign. I feel so sorry for the candidates who are campaigning during COVID. Because going to the door is the best way to connect with people, is the best way to get people to vote for you.
Great. I mean, those are, some really amazing reflections and thoughts that you've had. We have a question actually, which is a really good time to bring it up, which is from Reina Orellana Masco. She says, Melinda, yes. How can you motivate others to get involved in a campaign during this pandemic? For some reason, often Latinos are not motivated to get involved in campaigns.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the question, and good to hear from you, Reina. So one of our Lakeshore Latina friends, and I know you're working very hard on a campaign right now. So I think the biggest thing for running for office is what we try to do. It was never about necessarily me or the office. And it was about how do we come together as a community for this collective goal. So for us, it was a lot of talking about what does it mean to have that ethnic, racial representation on city commission, and that we've never had it. I think in some ways, many of us have experience in fundraising. It's much like how you train in fundraising, is that you can't go and do the ask right away. You can't say, hey, will you help me do this, if you haven't cultivated some of the relationship. So a lot of the work that I did before the campaign was a year before. So it was, me volunteering on other things, my husband. And then honestly, some of the, this is the shameless recruitment efforts, which I think I've used in all of my life, but is food. It sounds so basic, but we kind of joke that my dad's breakfast burritos and his love of cooking, spilled out into the campaign. And so we always promise to feed people. which again might be harder during COVID. I can understand that. But I also think, maybe so that those are two ways. But the third way, as I reflect more on COVID, is I think sometimes people need to say, I don't want to volunteer because I don't want to end up sort of like running this thing or running the campaign. So what I always try to do when to motivate people is, hey, whoever, let's say, hey, Raina, can you come out on Saturday for 2 hours? I only need you for 2 hours. This is what you're going to do. And you really try to understand who should be doing what. So for me, going door to door is great, but you also have to do the ask directly. That's what I've found out, especially with COVID. If you put things very generally out, that's great, and you want people to be aware, but you almost have to identify people who might have different skill sets and then send them a specific message or give them a call. People typically respond if you ask them directly. Has been my experience. But I feel for you, our Lakeshore Latina sister, because running during COVID is a whole nother challenge. Admittedly, I don't have as much experience with it, but I would say a very specific assignment during a very specific time and a direct ask. And if it can be from the candidate, if possible, that is the best. And hopefully that can yield it. Sometimes putting out goals, like if we get 15 people today, we'll be able to do this, which will result in a win. So, some people are I'm very much more qualitative data. Others might like hard numbers and statistics. But those would be my suggestions. So good luck.
Great. Those are some excellent thoughts. And I really like what you said about, getting together and understanding collectively what does this mean for ourselves, for our community, in order to have representation. And really, I mean, that is why I wanted you to come and talk, especially before our election, because the very first step is voting.
Yes.
That's the most important way for anyone to get involved, is to vote.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, for many, voting can be intimidating. I walk around, I haven't filled out my ballot all the way, although I know what I'm voting for and who I'm voting for, but I often want to refer to it when people call me and ask me questions. I will never say, this is who I'm voting for and you should vote for this, and then you should do exactly what I'm doing. I always try to say, this is who I'm voting for and why. Many people, and we know this from Simon Sinek to just probably like anything, is that people need to understand why you're doing something, not just like you're doing it, I'm doing it, so you need to do it. I find that just not very supportive. It actually isn't very equitable, in my opinion. It doesn't give us a strong understanding. Just being a candidate, a Latina candidate, is important. But there could be candidates, and we've seen it across the country, where people could be people of color, Black, Latino, and they might not have the best interest of specific communities. And that's something we have to wrestle with too. So representation isn't always the answer. It's really a representation and an understanding of what equity looks like, racial equity looks like in our communities. So yes, voting, doing the census, volunteering to be a poll worker. We've had a great just outpour of support for people who want to be poll workers on election day. To things of like serving on those boards and commissions that I mentioned many times. My husband serves on the zoning board of appeals in Grand Rapids. So they are a quasi judicial body. He doesn't ever want to run for office, but his organization supports, that volunteer work, and he really enjoys it. So whatever it is, and especially now with no reason absentee voting, you can do it from the comfort of your home. Pardon me. You can mail it in right now. There's enough time, or you can drop it off at one of your drop boxes. You can also go into your clerk's office, which I believe is safe to do if you follow those social distancing guidelines, and you can file your absentee right in the clerk's office as well. So there's so many ways, but I have a couple of friends who are voting in their first presidential election this year. They became citizens in the last year, in 18 months. And I'm so happy for them. I'm so proud to be able to help support them on their journey. And I'll be helping one of them fill out their ballot. And it's just, that's just such an exciting action. But I grew up going to the polls and voting with my parents. They took us. So if that wasn't, there's also a lot of just misinformation about voting. You know, my husband has a friend who has believed that he couldn't vote because of a felony conviction, and he's voting for the first time. And that happened because of a conversation that they had with friends. And, you know, somebody said, "Who are you voting for?" And it kind of came out that he thought he couldn't. And that just led to another person who's getting that opportunity, their right to vote in this election.
Great. Thank you. Yes, my husband and I, we always used to take our daughter, who's now 30, to, polls with us. And
Yeah. No.
so she could hardly wait until she turned 18 to vote
Yeah.
in the first election. Yes.
Mhm.
So, yeah, vote, make your plan to vote, fill out your census, do everything that makes certain that you can be represented, that your voice is heard, because that's what's really, really important. And that's actually what people ask me about LEDA. What does LEDA do? Is, we build bridges, and the reason I'm having these conversations is for different voices to be heard that don't always get heard, but that need to be heard.
Mhm.
So let's dive down into, what do you do as a city commissioner? What are your duties?
Yeah. So City Commission in Grand Rapids, we have a council manager form of government, even though we refer to ourselves as city commissioners. So we hire an executive, a CEO, and so that's our city manager, Mark Washington. And then we are divided into wards. So there are 3 wards in the city of Grand Rapids. I represent the 2nd ward along with my colleague Joe Jones, which is really sort of the northern part of Grand Rapids. And I've lived there. I've actually lived in every ward in Grand Rapids, but the 2nd ward, I'm proud to represent the 2nd ward. And then we have a mayor who is elected at large. And so there's 7 of us. Our roles are part-time positions. So people often say, "How do you do this job? And how do you try to do it well?" And my thing is, it's much like board governance. We need to allow, and we have amazing city workers, city employees. I got to know many of them before I was able to serve in this position through those boards and commissions, through requests that I had as a city resident. And so I just want to give a huge shout out to our Grand Rapids city employees. They are working very hard for you every single day. And so I believe that our form of government, of the council manager government, can only work when you have a strong workforce and strong leadership. And so that allows us as city commissioners and the mayor to focus on things like our city budget, which is about $55 million, ordinances, so different laws that might come into effect that we need to consider. Right now, some of the biggest things are just trying to adapt to COVID. So looking at, different laws that have come into place around, how businesses can operate during this time. So that has resulted in things like social zones in our city of Grand Rapids, contracts at a certain point, and who we might, engage with. Right now, we're in the middle or starting of our master planning process. So really looking at how our community, our city will exist over the next 20 years. It's been 20 years since we had a comprehensive update about, how do we use our land? What are the different requirements, and what are the things that we want to bring in terms of, economic development? We also are in the process of the restoration of our rapids and the economic development issues and opportunities that go along with that, with the strong focus on racial equity about who was originally on this land here in Grand Rapids. It was Indigenous people who are still here. And so we want to honor that and recognize that. We just had a proclamation that our mayor made last week, which was supported by our commission, for Indigenous Peoples Day next week, Monday. So that's, and there's a video on our website about that. I'm very excited about that. And just really looking at overall policy. So we do have a legislative agenda that we work on. So things like healthy housing, reduction of lead in our homes, protecting children. This past year, I was very happy. It was the last meeting before COVID where we did approve a resolution for driver's licenses for all, to support that. So we had previously supported that legislatively with letters and outreach. But that resolution was, another sort of hallmark of our commitment to racial equity in the city. And then doing things like appointing board members and people to different commissions, and then essentially being responsible for the performance and management and really the leadership of people who are appointed. So we're elected by the residents or the voters of our wards. And then our city manager, our city attorney, our city clerk, are appointed by our body and working on a variety of issues. So right now, a lot of focus certainly on violence, gun violence that is occurring in our city, policing, where funding should go, and also our election. How can we ensure a safe and fair election in our city? We might not have a lot of control at the federal level, but certainly working to create opportunities for people to cast their ballot and to do it safely and securely, whether it's from the comfort of their home or at one of our polls. And so, last commission meeting, we had a public hearing for a commemorative naming of one of our downtown's streets, at Rosa Parks Circle and Monroe Center, in honor of Breonna Taylor's memory, that was put forth by members of the community and supported by some members of her family. So it's a variety of things, and I enjoy it. I enjoy the policy work. I want to really make sure that we continue to dismantle parts of our a government that is not working for everybody, to decolonize in many ways things that have been the norm in city government, and to create it for more people to engage in our democracy.
Great. And we are almost done. I wanted to ask, what advice would you give to people, especially Latinx, who might be thinking of getting involved with governmental organizations and their communities?
Yeah. Well, I think that anybody should. I love Parks and Rec. So those of you, I love The West Wing. I love a lot of stories and sitcoms about what it's like in government, and it's not like Parks and Rec, but I'm definitely a Leslie Knope. Like, I want people to get involved, come to the telethon, run for office and support. But I think it's important for people to know that being involved in your local government or government overall, whether it's at the federal level or the city or county level, it has to be what works for you. So for me, it was running for office and doing this role in a legislative and a policy manner. But for others, it could be working inside of our city government. I mentioned Stacy Stout. We've got some amazing people in all of our departments. I have a friend who I went to Grand Valley with. He actually, Nick Salazar, he and I got to throw his name out there. He used to work at Hayworth in finance, and he and I talked a few years back, and he had a desire to get into city government. So he's now working in our finance office. There's things like our water department, certainly public safety, our clerk's office. There are, just like any other business, there are so many departments, and there might be a right fit for you. So it could be working. It also could be working on somebody else's campaign. And so that's what I've done in the past, and that's also very exciting. But if you don't desire to be sort of in the forefront, which is a lot of my life right now, that might be a good fit. And or it could be, sometimes people get put off working on campaigns or issues. And I hear a lot of people say, well, politics isn't for me. And what I tell people is politics is for everybody. Government is for everybody. When we think about the taxes we pay, the schools that we go to, the water we drink, the house we live in, the apartment we rent, all of those things are tied into our local governments and our state and federal governments. So when we say that we don't, kind of mess with politics, or we don't want to be a part of it, I think we're missing that general sentiment of like, we are focused on our lives. We are focused on prosperity. We want growth for every part of our community. And so how that looks actually we have to be actively engaged in that some way. I think about my friend Guillermo Cisneros, who's leading a chamber of commerce, which is not a formal form of government, but absolutely interacts with government in so many ways. So I firmly believe, you might not want to be Leslie Knope, in the later seasons, but there's a role for you in government at any level. And I, again, be happy to support or talk to anybody who has interest in that.
Great. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Milinda. So one more thing, we're almost done. Are there any parting thoughts that you would care to share with us?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that, I think about my life pre-COVID, and sometimes I was running around to places and doing things and, with the goals in mind. But I try to look at this time of COVID as a sense of reflection and understand. We kind of joked about, and not really, but talking about writing a book or writing an essay or reflection. And to me, the reminder I have to myself is to never give up on whatever that goal that you have in mind. This week, a Facebook post came up from 5 years ago when I was looking for an appointment to the Grand Rapids Community College Board of Trustees. It was something that I had wanted to do. I had run for that seat unsuccessfully, and I felt like this was my opportunity. And 5 years ago, I was not selected. And I remember writing that post and being very defeated. And now I fast forward to 2020, in my first year in office, in a pandemic, in a time where we are questioning, and we should, and recognizing the systemic racism that exists in a multitude of systems, including policing and our public safety systems, and dealing with an economic fallout for many individuals. We know that Black and Latino individuals did not recover in the same rates from our last economic downturn in 2008 and 2009. And so that's what I'm committed to, is to reducing things like our wage gap in Black and Brown communities, being very explicit when we're talking about the strategies that we need to employ. And so I believe they need to be very targeted to those who are experiencing those disparate outcomes and impacts. So what I tell people is, my parting thought is, like, never give up on that dream. And a reminder from undergrad is, like, the path isn't linear. So the path isn't always, you get this job, you end up in this role, you get promoted. For me, my path has been so full of twists and turns, bumps and frustrations and sadness, but it's also been, just absolutely amazing. And so don't give up on your dream. Let people know what you want to do is also a very important. Verbalize that to people so that you can get a little bit closer to the goal that you have in mind.
Great. Milinda, thank you so much. I'm going to finish up. If you can stick around for a couple minutes afterwards, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So that was Milinda Ysasi. And one of the things that she did talk about was equity. At LEDA, Lakeshore Ethnic Diversity Alliance, that's what we're focused on, is on educating people and organizations on equity. What does that mean? And what does it look like? And how did we get here? One of the ways for you to think about it is to go to our homepage, which is ethnicdiversity.org. Let me see if I can put that up. There we go. And we have a pledge, our commitment to dismantling racism, which is on our homepage. And it helps you put it in a framework or context. What can you actually do to dismantle racism? And as we go forward, we are actually going to be helping you by putting in different steps and different thoughts once you sign up to be a part of this, to work on this on your own, to reflect, and also to join with other people, other like-minded people within your organizations, communities, churches, etc. But again, thank you so much for supporting LEDA. And the Community Foundation of Holland, Zealand has been a wonderful, wonderful supporter of us, and it helps make these live stream conversations possible. So thank you so much, and have a great rest of the day.